before I start, my name's Adrian Cottrell, and I'm the CIO at the Institute of Cancer Research. If I could ask someone to give me a 5-minute warning so I stay to time, I'll be looking out for the signal. And the second thing, just to let people know, in terms of the prize for the best tweet, I've given up Twitter for Lent, so it's not going to be me. The field is open there. I'd like to do 4 things today. First of all, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what the Institute of Cancer Research is. I'd like to talk to you about the threat cyber presents to us, and you can probably guess that from the talks that have been given so far. I'd like to tell you about the journey my organization has been on. And lastly, I'll throw out a challenge to you all in the room about the role you can play to help research organizations like my own. So first of all, the ICR, or the Institute of Cancer Research, what is it? Well, if you get cancer and you're in London, the likelihood is you'll be directed to the Royal Marsden Hospital. And about 70 years ago, it was agreed that the research part of the hospital should be spun off to what is the ICR, the Institute of Cancer Research. So in the morning, we have some of the best people, in their field, telling life and death decisions to patients. And then they have a research team across the bridge in the afternoon, and that's where we have about 1,500 scientists, staff and students working at the Institute. It's a non-profit organization. Quite a few of these research organizations that operate in this way, and you can imagine in the current climate with the way fundraising and things have gone in the last couple of years, it is grim out there, actually, for all these sorts of research institutions. But about the ICR, it's what we call the Comprehensive Cancer Center. This is about going from the bench, the research, increasingly doing less in the test tube and more in silica, but also going all the way through to the patient at the bedside. And if you look at the papers and publications and citations globally, the ICR comes 3rd, 4th globally, so we're kind of a hidden secret there. The big American institutions with huge budgets are the ones that stand in front of us. Just say then that we are, reading my writing, we're a global organization, so we have staff and students from over 50 countries, and we're collaborating with people all around the world. One thing you will find is oncologists are kind of different from other researchers. They are literally dealing with life and death decisions almost every minute of every day, and they're more likely to give you their home number, approach you with research, because they're literally trying to save lives, and it becomes personal. And so the fight for discoveries is a global effort across the board. And in terms of the UK, about 50% of the practicing oncologists in the UK will have done a postdoc or a master's in the ICR, so it's like the finishing school for oncologists. And a couple of achievements that we've done. The ICR were the first organization to publish about the linkage between cancer and cigarette smoking. We were the first organization to say that DNA damage was a root cause of cancer. We also have, let me pick out a couple. We were the first organization to pick out the BRCA gene therapy, which is crucial towards all the therapies that have gone towards breast cancer. We are doing amazing, amazing stuff around radiotherapy at the moment, and sadly most of you will know this, but if you get cancer, it's surgery, it's chemo and radiotherapy, and the advances in technology in recent years has really pushed radiotherapy to the fore, and I'll give you a couple of examples in a moment. And finally, in terms of prostate cancer, we really have come up with some of the best drugs on the market, and we licensed those through J&J and others, and that's having great impact. So I just advance the slide, yeah. So let me just say about the number of this story, and that's about technology evolution. Clearly gives better outcomes from cancer patients. So if you look on the x-axis, you see technology advances over the last 20, 30 years. On the y-axis, you see the collaboration. And it wasn't that long ago, clinical trials and so on, they were all written down in paper forms, and it was all very, what can you do when it's paper? Barely anyone's reading the paper that someone wrote the day before. But as things got digitalized, we got systems that were bespoke within organizations. Those solutions started to get a bit more networked, so you could share systems, share data. In the last 5-10 years, huge amounts of data. So in my previous role, I was in charge of clinical trials and development within GSK. And I remember being faced 5 years ago with this challenge about how do we store these medical images? They're just so big, these files. They're just off the scale compared to where we were before. Where I am now at the Institute, it's videos of these things. Because cancer doesn't just sit there waiting to be taken. It moves around. And if you kind of do radiotherapy, you've got to know where it is. So actually, it's a very dynamic field with huge data volumes being generated. And then finally, what we're seeing is, and I'll show you a few examples in a moment, through the use of AI and machine learning, we were able to really, really improve the outcomes for patients. But unfortunately, at all this time, with all this fantastic technology and all this big global collaboration, cyber risk is just a nightmare. And this is really putting the brakes on a lot of what we do. I am constantly having to tell my scientists who just want to get on with things, you've got to take care. We've heard from Ronan and others earlier on today about one careless email and the whole institute could be brought down. And it's really hard to tell people who are trying to save lives. They've got to be a bit more careful. It's really difficult, but that's the role I have to play. So let me give you a couple of examples about some of the breakthroughs that we're doing, and this hopefully is some encouragement for all of us as we go through. You will probably know that if you get breast cancer or lung cancer, obviously the origin of it is quite well known, but actually it can move to other parts of the body and metastasize in different ways. And so you've got to look for it everywhere it is. And a key aid to this in radiotherapy is full body MRI, where you look at the whole body and you can see all the sites of the infection. You can see that rotating body will show you that case where the cancer is showing up. And what we're finding now through AI is you used to have to spend about half an hour in the MRI machine to get enough images to do the full body. We can now get that down to 5 minutes. When you think this is somebody that's a patient probably in chronic pain that's supposed to stay still, that is actually a big move forward, and we're going to reduce that all the time. We're also doing work to make other equipment, CT scans, which are much more available, try to use AI to simulate an MRI full body scan from a CT scan. So this is really clever stuff. And what's really fantastic about this is if you get somebody currently who may be diagnosed with cancer, maybe told they've got 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to live, all conventional therapies out of the way, they're given experimental treatment perhaps in a clinical trial. And normally what would happen is you'd have to give them the medicine, and every day counts, right? You give them the medicine for 6 weeks, 8 weeks to see how they are, and then you have to monitor how are you feeling to see how it goes. With full body MRI, we can track it straight away, and we can know that as we get data after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you should start to see signs of this having an effect. And if it's not, let's get you off that and get you on something else, because they just don't have the time. So you can see this is fantastic research that we're doing here. So yeah, that's the thing about it going down to 5 minutes. Another thing I want to talk to you about, two quick other things to mention too. One is the traditional way of if someone has cancer is you have a biopsy. And the way in which biopsy happens then is you take the biopsy, you slice it down, you put it on a slide, you stain it, and then you look to see whether there are cancerous cells on the slide. And increasingly there is a shortage of pathologists to do this work. But this is a massive opportunity, as you can imagine, for ML and AI. So as we build this global bank, these biobanks of samples, what you can do is take the sample, run it through, and within minutes find out this is definitely not cancer, this is definitely cancer, this might be cancer, so then you train your machine learning to be better at that, and then you refer them to a specialist. So that gives much quicker diagnosis, and in the very same way with cyber threats, early detection is really important to have good outcomes. And we can add to that because with the again, sharing of data around best therapies, we can look at the genotype and phenotype of the individual and say, yes, you've got this sort of cancer, and for you, these are the best therapies for you based on global information. So we're going away from the knowledge of one oncologist to a patient to harvesting the information from the whole world, and I think you can appreciate that is a very powerful way to proceed. The final thing to say on this one is, individually, we've got great radiologists, we've got great pathologists, we've got great people looking at the genetics side of things. And at the moment, when people get together, they have a meeting, and people cut and paste from PowerPoint to try and say, here's what we're seeing, and it's static. What we're going to do, you can imagine, is make this integrated diagnostic, so you've got real-time way of looking at the data to give much better outcomes for the patients. So let me just quickly, in the last 5 minutes I have, talk a little bit about the journey, because this is probably stuff that you will know. But when I started out on this journey at the ICR, I had quite a lot of resistance. It hasn't happened here. Why are you doing this to me? We're trying to help patients. But I try to describe this as the balloon that's about to burst. And when it does, it's a bang and life is different. I had at GSK a really horrible cyber incident there, and I tell people offline about that. And once you've been through one of those, you never forget it, because after it happens, everyone says, well, why didn't you tell us? If we'd have known that, well, we can spend any money, we'd have spent any money then, if we'd have known. But it's too late. The balloon is burst. So what did we do? The first thing I had to do is get a kind of a sense check of where we were in terms of our cyber maturity. I engaged Accenture to do that. I thought external credibility might help me there. We identified our top 10 risks. You could probably guess what some of them were. We sort of knew, but again, we wanted to make sure people went on the journey. We identified recommendations to address those risks, and we laid out sort of a costing plan to make it happen. We also we got approval for the investment. And what we did realize, of course, is there's the insider threat, which is a key part to this, but also we needed to introduce greater technology. And we made a conscious decision, just coming back to the previous speaker, to go with an MMSP model rather than try to hire in. And actually, for us, that was the best decision, because we also did agree to augment our internal team, but recruitment is really hard, and we don't pay, the same rates as industry. So I think the MMSP model actually works for institutions like us. And what we also did was we appointed a CISO. So we had somebody actually who was in role, but as we made the team bigger, we put that in place. We went after the insider threat really hard right from the get-go, and as Ronan and others mentioned, this was all going on during the pandemic. We looked at all our policies. We went right after our acceptable use policy and did a big launch campaign, because it was 10 years out of date and people were doing all sorts of things they really shouldn't. We then ran a campaign of cyber hygiene, we called it, and we said this is not just about when you're at work, it's about in your own private life too. It's about phishing and being aware of what goes on there. It's about using strong passwords and what to look out for. Initially, we had very low attendance, but we had a town hall meeting, and I kind of scared the bejesus out of them, and we had everyone turn up, and those have been very successful since. And we really did ramp up our phishing campaign to the point where our stats are looking pretty good now. I mean, you only need one, but they're looking very good compared to the sector. And now we're looking at the next stage about, what is the impact if you constantly fail some of these? Who are the worst offenders? What are the implications? You put the organization at risk. And if someone was lighting matches, you would do something about it. So we're thinking about that. And of course, we made our MSP selection. The MSP selection was smart tech through an RFI process, and we've been working over the last year on that. That was formally launched just about a year ago. We have the 24/7 monitoring, which gives us comfort. We established the log transfer. I think we're about 90% of our log files are now out there and being managed the SIEM. We set our vulnerability management, and we're halfway through our PAM implementation at the same time. I think it's fair to say that if you're going on this journey, there's pain first. So there's the ignorant incompetence. Once you know what you've got, then you've got to fix it. So I think we're sort of on our way through that part of the journey, but we've seen some pretty good inroads on a number of fronts now. And then finally, in terms of what we do, it's about monitoring and improving. And so, it was great help from Smart Tech that we got early warnings around SolarWinds and Log4j. We have weekly tactical meetings about what we should do. We have quarterly reviews, and we get the forecasting that helps us engage with our senior organization. So in the last 20 seconds or so that I have, and I see the clock has kept me in good time, let me just say a little thing to you all. Probably all of you have been where I've been, where you've been at a funeral or you've heard some terrible news about somebody who has got an ailment, and you just say to yourself, if there's only something I could do, I feel so useless. We've probably all been there. Let me tell you two things. There are two things you can do. If you're working in cyber and looking at solutions, institutions like mine really need all the stuff that you're doing it. And I would just ask if you can do it at a price we can afford, because our pockets are small. And if you can't do that, donate to a charity that means something to you. Those charities, or the research organizations, they are really struggling out there. So whether it's ICR or it's somewhere else, they need your help.